Hey everyone. It's been a long day. Joe Rogan's video there was 2 hours. Whenever I saw something that was interesting, I went back, would put down a timestamp, write some notes, and then watch it again and continue from there. So I probably have like 3 hours invested in that video to be able to make the video that I made. I started recording my video to put online. I use OBS. One of the problems that I've noticed with OBS is that whenever I get to roughly an hour and a half, give or take, this stupid thing will not turn off. And so I had this very long video. I think maybe it was pushing 2 hours. I don't remember, but it was well over an hour, around an hour and a half, I believe. Would not shut off. Couldn't stop recording, couldn't pause it. I shut OBS down. It was still running in the background. I had to open up, do Control Alt Delete, and shut it down with that little pop-up. What do they call that? Task Manager? Yeah. Shut it down that way. Except what? It deleted over half the video. And so it stopped with 39 minutes of it or something like that. It's like, crap, I'm not going to be done with this. These are the kind of videos that I want to do, though. Whenever I was first doing videos, whenever I first started, I was able to do a whole lot. It's because I wasn't really doing too much. It was, oh, here's something that I can talk about. And I can talk quite a bit on these subjects. But with this one, this is what the website is going to be. I want facts and information and evidence up at the top. And then people's opinions going down and down more, okay, well, this is your opinion, but you're accredited. You don't have jack. You're just some kid. It's like, yeah, you troll. I've probably spent close to 6 hours on this one video because it wasn't just this. There were several other videos and articles that I went through where it's like, nope, trash, nope, trash, nope, trash, a lot, because how much information is there on sleep? It's like, I don't want all this. It's so annoying having to go through all of these videos and articles to just deal with sleep. Why can't it be all together in one location? And I know how to do that where it can be accurate and up to date and, most importantly, trusted. I know the key to it. And it's nothing new. It's like I say so much with a lot of this stuff. It's just not updated. Technology doesn't play a role in it at all. It's been completely overlooked. And it's like, it would fit so well. It's going to do fantastic. I tell you what, for all of you who are watching this, there's going to come a time whenever it's going to just be slow as dirt starting off. And then it's finally going to start getting traction, and then it's just going to skyrocket. I have some ideas for some apps, and this site is just going to grow and blow up beyond imagination. It's ridiculous because I had that damn epiphany, and it just leads to one thing to the next. Because what do people lie about? Everything, all the time. Oh, I lie about stuff. It's unintentional, but it happens. And a lot of it is because, you know what, this guy could be lying. And so I'm telling you all a bunch of lies. It's unintentional. So if you two would like to see things get better, not perfect, but better, man, I tell you what, I got it, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this. It's going to be a roller coaster ride, so give the video a like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. I've got Patreon and PayPal. And I took a look to see where I was at on the last little bit that I had. I guess I should be thankful that at least I had 40 minutes of material, so I'm not having to start all the way over. And we were talking about, I'm not sure exactly where, I was going off on a tirade a little bit. And we were talking about shift workers, timestamp 59 minutes and 35 seconds. And I was talking about the WHO, and that with everything with COVID going on, it's like, yeah, they've been a joke. They've been a joke. And it's because the structure that they have is all wrong. It's too much politics and money, and it's like that's the completely wrong system that we want now. It's all that we've had. We're not using technology like we should, because technology, we can make it unbiased, and we can make it so that we still all have a tremendous amount of control. But anyways, this is neither here nor now. This will be something for later. So that was number 7 on the list, and I'm just going to go ahead and go to number 8. So number 8 is going 14 days with only 6 hours of sleep. Your cognitive performance just nosedives, and after 20 hours of being awake, you are as impaired cognitively as if you were legally drunk. Drowsy driving is linked to a car accident every 30 seconds. It kills more people on the roads than alcohol and drugs combined. I'm going to move this a little closer because I was thinking about if I had my microphone closer to me, would it sound a little bit better? I know it kind of echoes a little bit, and it's just the way that it's going to have to be for at least a little while. Let me find that. All right, so
keeps going. So if and these studies have been done, take people and give them 2 weeks of 7 hours of sleep, 5 hours of sleep, 3 hours of sleep, or no sleep. Even by sort of 7 days or even 14 days of 6 hours of sleep, your cognitive performance just nosedives like a dart into the ground. And it doesn't show any signs of leveling off, as if there is no asymptote that it could keep going. And by the way, people should know that after 20 hours of being awake, you are as impaired cognitively as you would be if you were legally drunk.
I'm going to push on this. I don't know how true this is, because I have definitely been awake for more than 20 hours and driven. I feel tired and stuff, but to be on the same level as that you're legally drunk, I don't know. Maybe it was because... When did I do this? I did this whenever I was doing a bunch of driving around for a job in a very large area. I was doing this whenever I was in the military, whenever I was deployed to Bosnia, did a lot of driving there. I don't know, but I don't drink a lot. Maybe 6 to 12 times a year. I've never been drunk. I've drunk enough where I notice it, but I mean, it's not like I'm stumbling around vomiting or anything like that, just enough to kind of relax. So I don't know, maybe I'm unaware of what it is to be legally drunk. Maybe that's lower than what I understand it to be. So I don't know, just wanted to kind of push on it. However, I have been sleepy enough that I have fallen asleep at the wheel on more than one occasion, and I've just been fortunate that I didn't crash in anything. It's been into the ditches a couple of times, and then one time I was actually just driving and I was sick and I just kind of passed out. And I knew it was coming. And it's like, don't do it. But I literally had nowhere because there was guardrails on both sides. Didn't crash into anything, just got real fortunate, and I got off the road and went down a little bit further and pulled over and opened up the car door and vomited right there. It was bad. It's like, it's like I turned around and went home. I was gonna meet some family. It's like, nope, not doing it. And then with number 9, he talks about how important it is for teenagers to sleep, and drowsy driving with them, and their case study that they showed whenever they moved the time back. Drowsy driving is the leading cause of death in most first world nations. Suicide is second. That's horrible. There was a study in Teton County, Wyoming, and they moved the start of school from 7:35 in the morning to 8:55, and there was a 70% reduction in a car crash the following year. That's impressive.
Wow. What about physical movement?
So, when you're underslept, you start to have what are called micro sleeps. Sometimes
And I've had these.
your eyelid does not close all the way, it just partially closes, but the brain essentially goes to sleep for just a very brief period of time. And you can
I know exactly what that is. It's happened to me a couple of times. It's not fun.
What happens here is that when with drugs and alcohol, it's often the case of 5 in the morning, much more biologically reasonable.
Strange.
It's that monotonous, behavior.
There's the teenager
and the longer
stuff.
you go with that monotony, the worse things get. And if you look at, teenagers, that's where we see some of the greatest impact of drowsy driving. It's the leading cause of death in most first world nations. Suicide is second.
I wonder if he's talking about all drivers or just teenage drivers. And it makes sense, who are going to be horrible drivers. Teenagers, it's like, yeah, because they're new. They're new at driving.
Wow, that is crazy.
And it speaks to this, in this model of later school start times. They've done these studies. There was a great one that was done, I think, in...
And I like it that he refers to studies. I like that consistently. And with the website that I want to build, it's going to be based off of these studies with also having peer review with it. And it's like, well, why can't we peer review? I mean, you're going to have to be accredited in some way to be able to do it. We're not going to just let any Tom, Dick, and Harry do it. But, well, if you wanted to, it's like, yeah, here's the credentials that you're going to have to kind of accomplish to do it. But why not? What's wrong with you? It's like nothing. If you get it, you get it.
Teton County in Wyoming, they shifted their school start times from 7:35 in the morning to 8:55 in the morning, much more biologically reasonable for teenagers. The only thing more impressive than the extra hour of sleep that those teenagers reported getting was the drop in vehicle accidents. There was a 70% reduction in car crashes the following year when they made that time to 7-0.
Holy shit.
The advent of
And I don't care if he even got that number off. If it's 60, 50, 40, all those are still incredibly impressive.
ABS technology, for example, anti-lock brake systems, that dropped accident rates by 20 to 25%. Some deemed it to be a revolution. Here's a simple biological factor, sleep, that will drop accident rates by 70%. Wow. So I think if our goal is educate...
Tell you what, he's bringing up so many good reasons as to why you need 8 hours of sleep.
Truly is to educate, and we've spoken about learning and memory, and not risk lives in the process, then we are failing our children in the most spectacular manner with this incessant model of early school start times.
Why do we do that? Like what? And not just...
And they talk about it a little bit about how it's more about the parents having to go to their job earlier, and so they want to get their kids off to school first, because how are you going to do that whenever you're at work? That makes it a lot more difficult. And then at an hour and 15 minutes and 15 seconds, they are talking about kids with their SAT scores going up with having more sleep.
Create them to be the next generation. Early school start times, are not the thing to do.
There's a lot of lazy kids out there that are going, yes!
Well,
preach on, doctor, preach!
I mean, the data, they looked at these academic things too. One of these, another example comes from Adena in Minnesota, and they shifted school start times from, I think it was...
And see, this is the way that the United States is supposed to be, is that each state is supposed to be doing different things, and then you collect the information, see what's working and what's not, and then other states should be following suit. Not the federal government passing this unilateral legislation across the entire country. No, each state's supposed to be a testing place. So if one state wants to legalize marijuana, let them. But let's take the information and see what actually happens. So then that way we can make the best decisions possible off of the best information that we currently have. So it's like, okay, well then I'll do it, since apparently nobody seems to give a damn about it. And that this is information that you should be able to use with your life and as much as possible. And that's what this is. This is, well, who sleeps? Well, everybody. Well, let's get some really good information out there to everyone. And where does that information come from? Well, not from me, but from someone like Matthew Walker, who has his degree and he's been doing this for 20 years. It's like, okay, well, at least his credentials are in place.
7:25 to 8:30 in the morning, and they looked at SAT scores. And in the year before they made the time change, the top 10% performing students got an average SAT score of 1,288.
Just the top 10%.
The following year, when they were going to school now at 8:30 rather than 7:25, the average SAT score was 1,500. That's a 212.
So it went from just the top percent to the average of all of them.
Point increase, which is non-trivial.
I think that's what he's saying.
That's gigantic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the school time in correlation with the work time.
And they talk about this several times, about how if you want better job performance, that it's been shown that it's better for you to not work long hours, for you to have long hours of sleep. We'll get into it in the second part of all this, about how he says between 7 to 9 hours, kind of a minimum. I guess you could go above that. You could do like 10 hours if you really wanted to be safe. And I've heard this before, in that if you want, kids are the ones who need the most sleep. They're the ones who really need 9 hours. And as you get older, you actually need less. And it's not until you get into like your 80s where it starts to decrease again. And then at 1 hour, 21 minutes, 15 seconds, they're talking about, we know that the number of people that can survive on 6 hours of sleep or less without showing any impairment, rounded to a whole number and expressed as a percentage in the population, is 0. And you cannot tell when you're sleep deprived. People get it wrong, just like drunk people that think that they can drive, which I thought was a good comparison right there. Because I've known plenty of people get drunk, they think that they can drive, and it's like, no, you can't. But if you know them and your friends, and it's easy to get drunk people to do just about whatever you want, and taking the keys from them, it's like that's one of the easiest things that you can do. It's like, oh, you are absolutely in no condition to drive. If you can't do that, you're worthless. I've got no love for you at all. You are just trying to kill somebody if you can't take the keys from a drunk person.
8 hours of sleep. Almost 1 out of every 3 people that you pass on the street are trying to survive on 6 hours or less of sleep. Back in 1942, Gallup did a poll, and what they found was that the average American adult was sleeping 7.9 hours of sleep.
That's good.
Now that number, most recently, is down to 6 hours and 31 minutes for the average adult during the week.
I'm so glad I did this, because I was thinking of being one of those people at 6 hours, because it's kind of a race. Somebody else can do what I'm doing, and they could beat me to it because they're willing to put in more time, and that could still happen, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my health over it. Not like this. And it's like, well, if I'll come in as close as I can in 8 hours, so I'm not going to do 9. It's like 8 hours. I'm not going to do 7 either, because I do want to kind of play it safe, and there'll be times whenever I'm going to have to pull an all-nighter, I suppose, and not get the full 8 hours.
America. That's the average, by the way. That means that there's a huge swath of people well below that average.
Now, what about the people that say that they sleep, they go to bed, they sleep 5 hours, they wake up and they feel great?
Yeah.
Is that bullshit?
We have the number of people who can survive on 6 hours of sleep or less without showing any impairment, rounded to a whole number and expressed as a percent of the population, is 0.
What?
So just that we're clear, what he did not say was that, no, there's no one. He said whenever you round it and you put it as a percentage, it's 0. So there are some people, but it's incredibly small. And he does talk about it and he said that you have a greater chance of being struck by lightning than having this gene. So, have you ever been struck by lightning? No? Well, then you don't have this gene either, so don't worry about it. And this just goes to, I've said this in other videos too, is that even though it's a small percentage, it can still be a lot. And so, like, how many gay people or trans people are there? You know, it's like 1% or something like that. It's a ridiculously small thing. But whenever the base number is huge and you're talking about millions of people, you know, if you're talking about 100 million people and it's 1% of the population, well, that's still 1 million people out of 100 million. So it's both small and large at the same time. So, you know, a little something to be aware of.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. 0.
So even though this might be a very small number, percentage-wise, where it even comes in at 0, that still doesn't mean that there's not nobody. So.
And one of the big problems with a lack of sleep, by the way, is that you don't know you're sleep deprived when you're sleep deprived. So your subjective sense of how well you're doing with a lack of sleep is a miserable predictor of objectively how you're doing. So it's like a
Especially
drunk
with
drive.
men, right?
Yeah,
Right.
especially,
Yeah.
perfect example. You know, you're at the bar, you've had 6 or 7 shots, and you say,
fine.
I can drive home, I'm fine. And
Yeah.
your response is,
Right.
I know that you think you're fine to drive subjectively.
Right.
You know, and you see this, you know, they used to have that show Cops, and they'd get out and cops would say, well, walk on this line. They're like, no, I'm fine. They think that all the time, but whenever you're actually having to prove it, it's like they can't walk on that line, you know, or at least a lot of them couldn't. Moving on. So we're almost done with this, and this is kind of all of the reasons why you need to be aware of this, of the sleep, especially the bad things. And then this next little part here are kind of the good things, and also talk about the things that you can do, is how it's going to end up. What are things that we can actually do to make sure that we're doing what we can, because, you know, sleeping is, well, it's free. Everybody sleeps. You got to do it anyways. If they were telling me to take pills, I'd be a little more skeptical about that. You know, well, you got to take these pills, you know, twice a day, every day at night for the rest of your life. It's like, yeah, take your little sales pitch somewhere else. So at an hour and 27 minutes and 40 seconds, he talks about 2 studies. And in one of them, they gave people 4 hours of sleep just for one night, and they found a 70% reduction in anti-cancer fighting immune cells called natural killer cells. And this is really important to me because my mom died of cancer, her dad died of cancer. He says that we're all producing cancer cells all the time because they're just like anything else, it all goes bad at some point in time. And this is your body's natural way of dealing with a lot of this stuff. So if you know someone who's dealing with cancer, or if you have cancer that runs in your family, strongly encourage them to watch this video and say, hey, I want you to listen to, about how important sleep is, because I'm taking out a lot of Joe Rogan stories and some of their other kind of lesser little conversations, because they just kind of have a little bit of small talk in there. And so I'm trying to get to kind of the heart of the matter a little bit more. But there, again, I'll have links in the description below for all these. If cancer runs in your family, though, or with your friends, it's like, yeah, go ahead and listen. Because these are relatively easy, cheap little things to do. One of them is buying blackout curtains. It's like, it's just curtains. They're not expensive, and it's a one-time buy. So it's like, yeah, I can do that. And then the other study that he talks about is daylight savings time in correlation with heart attacks. And then he also talks about DNA damage when you don't get 8 hours of sleep. And it's like, oh, crap. And whenever those little telomeres start going, you know, that's kind of dooming. They're only so long, and they get shorter and shorter. An hour 51. So I made quite a bit of a jump. Part of this is that it was like, I'm spending too much time here. This is taking forever, because this was hours. Because keep in mind, I spent just 2 hours alone watching this video.
Problem. Well, there are other medical training systems, for example, France, Sweden, New Zealand. They do this all the time. They do not allow their residents to undergo anything longer than either a 14 or a 16-hour shift.
And so what he's talking about here is that over here in the U.S., we have our doctors go through residency, and they will do 30-hour shifts. And he's like, there's over a 470% increase that there's going to be some kind of fatal mistake that happens. The same thing with the doctor. And that if your doctor has only gotten like 6 hours of sleep or something, you need to tell that doctor to go take a hike. I'm not going to have anything to do with you. You better go get your 8 hours of sleep. Because it's the same thing with the doctor. And I think we'll talk about that on the other flip side of all this.
They train their residents in the same amount of time or less. And if you look at the rankings of their medical health systems around the world, they rank far higher than the United States.
And he also talks about how this is something that happens with businesses. That if you have employees who talk about how they work all the time and they don't ever sleep, their actual performance is much worse. And they're the ones who are not going to do very much work at all. They're going to do very simple jobs. And if they're in a group, they're going to ride on the coattails of the others. And they're not going to pull their fair share of weight. So if you hear somebody like that, be aware.
So you can't tell me that longer work hours for residents, for example, are necessary to train good doctors. The evidence just didn't support it. So I've had some pushback there. But for the most part, I think people are receptive once they know.
And he does talk a lot about the history and stuff of a lot of these things. And with this one, he talks about that this kind of started with the doctors decades and decades, maybe over 100 years ago. I forgot whenever he said, but he accidentally got hooked on cocaine, and it was the cocaine that was doing it. He didn't mean to. It was kind of an accident. It was something else that was going on, and I think it was so far back that they weren't even completely aware of the effects of cocaine in the first place. And while he was trying to get off of it, because being a doctor, he realized a correlation between what was going on with him and the cocaine, that he went in and they gave him some morphine, and then he ended up being addicted to morphine and cocaine at the same time. And it's like, of course, and he was telling everyone, well, you need to keep up with me. So it's a bad story. So
know the information, and I think I've been someone who's been to blame here. I've evidence about the deathly, carcinogenic, cardiovascular disease issues, but the public had not.
And he's blaming himself because he's been doing this research for like 20 years and hadn't said anything.
Being aware, no one had adequately communicated the science of smoking to the public. The same, I think, is true for sleep right now. That's part.
And he's right. Whenever I was going to school, nobody ever really drove anything into my head about how important sleep was. Now, granted, I don't know if they knew all of this stuff, because if this was like 20 years ago and he's been doing all this whole time and they didn't know anything, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, because this guy's going to be roughly about my age then. But where's the information now? Whenever I was doing this video, there was just information all over the place, and it was so annoying. So much of it was repetitive. Some of it was the opposite, and it's like, who do you believe? It's like, well, I know exactly what can be done to make things a hell of a lot better than what they are.
Part of the motivation for why I wrote the book, why I've been doing or trying to do a lot of publicity. I'm a very shy person, and I don't.
But part of the problem too is that it's stuff like this video right here. There's a lot of unnecessary fluff, and so this is a benefit of watching me, is that I'm trying to cut a lot of this out. I'm trying to get right to more of the meaningful parts and make sure that it's in layman's terms as much as possible, so as many people can digest this to understand what's being said.
Like being in the spotlight, but I feel as though there is a mission whose voice has not been actually gifted yet. And I wanted to try and help and be a sort of a sleep diplomat. I mean, that's why I chose the handle on social media, trying to be there as an ambassador for sleep. And now, once people start to understand the science, as we've spoken about for 2 hours, then people start to actually realize it's not the third pillar of good health alongside diet and exercise. It's the foundation on which those two other things sit. For example, if you're dieting, but you're not getting sufficient sleep, 70% of all the weight that you lose will come from lean body mass, muscle, and not fat. Your body becomes stingy in giving up it.
And this is really important to me because I used to weigh 230 pounds. And I've noticed I've yo-yoed with it some. I gain it and lose it and stuff. But it's kind of like the stock market, going up and down, but instead of up, it keeps going down. And I've noticed that I've experienced muscle loss with this, even though I'm doing a lot of good things. It's like, why am I experiencing the muscle loss? I don't lift as much for some reason all of a sudden. It's like, why? And it looks like this might be an answer. And so if I can fix all of these problems, or even just some of these problems just by sleeping 8 hours, it's like the reasons that he's giving are all really good reasons. And so just here's another one. Weight loss. So if you're having problems with weight loss, are you sleeping enough? What's it going to hurt to try? It's free.
It's fat when it's underslept. So once you get this information out there, things are starting to change. I've started to have some discussions with the World Health Organization.
And here we go. I tell you what, keep this in mind. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Because there's profits to be made, money.
They seem to be very interested now in getting...
Oh, now? Why? Why? What's changed?
...to grips with sleep. I'd love to speak to first world governments, though.
Why? Why can't first world governments figure this out on their own? It just doesn't make sense. It's like, shouldn't they be on board with this? If this research is good and accurate, then what would be the problem? Why is there not a system in place so that we can have the best, most accurate information available at our fingertips? And what do you need the government to do this for? It's like the government's not made out of magic. It's not like you go to the Capitol and it's just unicorns flying around, jumping over rainbows, farting pixie dust out their ass. That's not it. We can do this ourselves. And that's exactly what I'm doing here with this.
When was the last time you saw any first world nation have a government-supported public health campaign around sleep? I don't know.
Why are you waiting for the government to do this? It just makes no sense. We can do this ourselves. Screw that. I don't want the red tape. I don't want to jump through hoops. None of that stuff.
No, Eddie, we've had them for, drink driving, for risky behaviors.
And there's been problems with all of that. That MAD campaign was absolute trash, and you can find plenty of stuff about how bad that was. Risky behavior, well, that's an awful general term. What are you talking about? Because right now there are some social justice warriors who are absolute nut jobs who believe in some really stupid things. And back in the 90s, it was kind of reversed, where there was this really big Christian kind of conservative thing going on. And I don't think they took it too far, but some things they absolutely did. And it's like, why would you want any of that?
For drugs, for alcohol, for health.
And don't tell me about that drug stuff too, because that stuff came with Nancy Reagan, that lunatic woman. It's like, you know what? You are not the president. It is your husband. And she started all that war on drugs campaign stuff. And it's like, woman, shut the hell up. And you know what it's done? It has made so many things so much worse. You can go to Mexico and the drug cartels and everything that's going on with them, and they just point fingers like mad with us all the time. There are countries like in Spain where they've legalized some drugs, and it's still a problem, but they've got a lot more control over it because they can say, all right, well, we're going to have it at this location. I've talked about this in another video before. I'm not going to talk about it again.
Healthy eating.
I'll probably talk about it again later, but I want to stay focused on sleeping.
Sleep should be a part of that equation. I want to lobby governments to start to instigate this, and it will save them millions of dollars.
They don't care. They don't care if it will save them millions of dollars because they like putting their hands in the cookie jar, taking money out. Just look at what Biden's doing with all of this government spending and inflation. He's making things so horrible. We know this too. All of the data has been published that we need to understand what inflation is. We know what causes inflation. We know what causes deflation. Why we don't do deflation, why we don't focus in on that, it's just lunacy to me.
Corporation did an independent survey 2 years ago on the demonstrable cost of a lack of sleep to global economies. What they found was that a lack of sleep costs most nations about 2% of their GDP.
They don't care. Your GDP has gone up and down. What impact has that made on you, on your life? Hasn't done anything for me. Doesn't do anything for you. It's just, it would for big businesses and rich people, but that's not politicians. You know, I guess Trump might be the exception. He's the only billionaire I know who's ever been in office.
The gross domestic product. Here in America, that number was $411 billion caused by insufficient sleep. Solve the sleep loss epidemic, you could almost double the budget for education.
You can't, because the sleep industry is $1 billion industry, I'm sure, with all of that stuff. And they want people to work more. They like all that stuff. So, no. You're not... Politicians are only concerned about whatever issues is going to get them reelected, and that is going to come from their constituents who want more money in their pockets. And I've talked about that, about how it's a big loophole with all this stuff. So what should you do? So how many hours of sleep should we get? So now we're going to start on back over, and we're going to go to 34 minutes and 50 seconds where he's going to tell us.
Wow. Now, how many hours of sleep should you get?
Somewhere between 7 to 9 hours. Once you get below 7 hours of sleep, we can measure objective impairments in your brain and your body.
I can show that in...
And the younger you are, the more sleep that you need. And you can obviously see this with babies. And there was a video that I saw where they were talking about how it's so weird, where we don't think anything of it if a baby just sleeps at any time, any place. But we do that with us. And it goes in with circadian rhythms. I haven't really talked about it. He's brought it up several times, but not in very depth. It's going to be one of my upcoming videos. I wanted to do this on Jordan Peterson about how to have good morals and values and kind of what it means to build a good foundation, but I'm having such an issue with sleeping right now. It's like I got to do this, but I'm going to get back on that Jordan Peterson book and finish that up, because I want to be that Noble House Jones. And it's not going to be weak sauce like what you see with TVs and movies. It's like, no, I'm going to build up something real big here. Do it with me. That's great. Put your own flair into it. I don't have the best way to it at all. It's just my way. And then so this one's kind of sad a little bit in a way. At 50 minutes and 10 seconds, he starts talking about 5 things to do. And after about the third one there, they get distracted and he doesn't say the other 2. So instead of going to it, I'm just going to say it, since he doesn't go over all 5. But he does say that the number one most important thing that you can do is have regular sleep. Go to bed and get up at the same time. So we will listen to that one, since he does stress that one really, really heavily. But number 2 is keep the lights turned down in your house. Keep it dark. Control it. Whenever you're like about an hour away from going to bed, turn at least half the lights off. Number 3 is to keep it cool, and it's for your brain. Your brain will not go to sleep if you're too hot with your brain. In order for it to shut down, it's got to cool down. The way I thought of it was like your car engine. And that by a minimum, it needs to be, you need to drop it by 2 to 3 degrees. However, he specifically says around 64 degrees. And sleep semi-naked seems to be really good. And to go to sleep with your socks and gloves. And it's because it's the way that your body heats and cools itself. And it's kind of backwards of what people think, which we've kind of always... Or some things that we've already seen with this is that people have gotten some things wrong with it. And then to take a warm bath, that it cools you. And whenever I heard of that, I thought of air conditioner systems with Freon. Freon is a very cool substance, and what it does, it's really good about taking and releasing hot and cold air. And so Freon goes outside to your air conditioner unit, and there's like a big fan, and it literally blows the hot air off, and it cools it down, and it comes back in real cold. And another fan blows the cool air in, and it circulates back, and it kind of goes back forward. It's a little more complicated than that, but for the most part, that's it. It's fans. And that's exactly what I thought of whenever I thought of this is that the water gets on you, it sucks the hot air out, or the hotness out of you, and takes it with the water. It's like, it just transfers the heat from you into the water. Just like if you touch something hot, that's the opposite. The heat goes from like the stove onto your finger. So we'll listen to just a little bit. We're not going to listen to all.
Last 2 days, and I can show it because I basically did the same workout 2 days in a row. The day before, I'd flown back from Boston, very tired. Hung out with my kids all day. Went to get some sleep, but then I had to do some stuff at like 2:00.
By your sleep. Those studies have been done too.
Wow. What should someone do if they have a hard time sleeping? Like, say if you're a person who has insomnia, you have a hard time getting to bed, you have a hard time staying asleep. When you wake up, you can't go back to bed.
Yeah.
Are there strategies?
There are. I mean, I think for most people, there are 5 things that you can do just out the gate to get better sleep. Regularity is probably the most important thing I can tell you. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, no matter whether it's the weekend, weekday. Regularity is key. We've spoken about light. For example, when you, in the last hour before bed, try to stay away from screens, but also just switch off half the lights in the house.
And so he talks a good deal about all this, and part of the reason why I'm going to skip this is because I have another video where he's going to talk about all of this, and he'll have 6 things that he's going to talk about. So since he doesn't even get through these 5, we're not even going to do that. And so at 1 hour and 3 minutes and 30 seconds, he says that napping can give you some benefits. Napping can give you some, but it won't help you if you don't have a full night's sleep. So you still have to do 8 hours. You can do 8 hours and naps, and you're fine. But if you do 6 hours and naps, you're not. It'll still help you some, but nothing beats just getting your 8 hours of sleep. And that your brain, it doesn't have like a credit system, so you can't like, I'm going to work really hard all week, I'm not going to sleep very much, but then I'm going to get caught up on the weekend. It doesn't work like that. He does say it's kind of weird though, because we do have that with fat, that you can do this feast and famine where you can go out and you can eat a whole bunch and it'll store it as fat, and it'll help you out. But we're the only animals that we do this. We're the only animals that we stay up. Every other animal, they sleep. They don't keep themselves up for any reason. We're the only nut jobs on the planet, I guess you can say. So.
Naps. Like, say if you only have 5 hours of sleep, but you take a 2-hour nap during the day. Does everything make up?
Yes and no. So what you're talking about there is what we call prophylactic napping, which is sort of strategically trying to help combat your deficiency of sleep. Naps can actually give you benefits. We've done some of these studies where they improve, your learning, your memory, your alertness, your concentration, especially your emotional regulation too. Sleep is critical for emotional first aid and mental health. However, you can't keep using naps to self-medicate sort of short sleep of 4 or 5 hours each night. We know that the system itself, your brain, has no capacity to regain all of the sleep that it's lost. It will try to sleep back some of that debt, but what we've discovered, let's say I take you tonight, I deprive you of sleep, 8 hours lost, then I give you all of the recovery sleep that you want on a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th night. You will sleep longer, but you will only get back maybe just 3 or 4.
That's, oh man, you don't know how many times I've just stayed up all night with friends or family with some kind of gathering, or whenever I was younger and I played video games like crazy and would just stay up all night with friends just playing games. Oh, this new game came out, or just whatever, and it's not a care in the world. And now it's like, what did I do? And so if you want to watch the rest of it, but that gets the point across. And then he also talks about eating, that you shouldn't really go to bed too full or too hungry. Don't have a bunch of sugar and starches. It's not good for sleeping. and that you should eat several hours before. So between 5 to 2 hours, depend on your age and your size, man, woman, all that kind of stuff. Not really gonna quite go over that because dieting is it's kind of a complex monster in of its own. There are people who just swear up and down to fasting, intermittent fasting, whether if you can eat or not, if you should have one big meal or several big meals or whatever. So I'm not really going to quite do that. And then he does talk about, and I thought of meditation. And at 38 minutes 45 seconds, he's talking about studies have shown what you can do to increase performance by just mentally practicing your skill by visualization of that motor skill. And it's about as 50% as effective as physically performing that skill. It is 50% effective in changing the plasticity connection within the brain. So we'll listen to that just a little bit because I like meditation. I've done it before. And what meditation is, my understanding of it at least, is that you clear your mind. You get in a comfortable position, and only for about 10 minutes. Close your eyes. It helps to not have any noises going on too, and so I'll put in earplugs. And you just tell your brain, or I tell my brain, shut up, stop talking. And it's hard because it just keeps going. And I think of it like, well, whenever you go and you work out, you don't work out all the time. Most of the time, you don't work out. Most of the time, you're just whatever. You're not lifting weights constantly. But your brain is constantly going, and it's supposed to help with depression and just kind of your attitude in general. Just 10 minutes. And I got it to where my brain would actually shut up for a while. I remember being a little kid that whenever I was real young, like 5, that I noticed that my brain would not shut up for some reason because I could just go to my room, get into bed, and just go to sleep. But then, for some reason, my brain would not shut up and I could not go to sleep. It was like, what the hell's going on? And I don't know how long it took me to go to sleep, and it was kind of a problem ever since then. And I remember thinking, man, I miss the days where my mind would just shut up and just let me go to sleep. It took a while for me to get used to it, and I stopped doing it, and I should really do it again because it did help. And it's like, it's just 10 minutes and it's free. Doesn't cost anything, so why not?
I think it's to a lesser extent, but people have done those studies where they've looked at sort of whether you actually physically practice, let's say on a keyboard, just because it's easier to sort of manage in a laboratory, versus just imagining sort of typing out that sequence, and just the act of physical visualization of sort of imagination of that motor skill.
And this was making me think too about, well, if there was something that I was wanting to learn but I couldn't, so like maybe learning how to play, and I was just nowhere, nothing was really going on, maybe I could be a little productive by thinking about something important at the moment, especially if it was some kind of skill like learning an instrument. That'd be kind of cool. I could give a few minutes to doing that.
It's about 50% as effective as physically performing it too, and it's 50% as effective, what I mean there is, in changing the plastic connections within the brain. Whoa. So even just visualization, passive play, as it were, still can actually cause a rewiring of the brain beneficially.
Wow.
Or if anything, you could maybe take if you've got a song that you're trying to learn with the piano, you could take the song with you, and if you had some time and nothing was going on, you could just look at it to also help with your visualization. So whatever it is that you may be learning, maybe that's a little something you would want to incorporate yourself. All right, so then what are 6 things that we can do to help with this? I'm going to go ahead and skip through a lot of this.
Are 6 scientifically grounded tips
for better sleep. The first tip is regularity. Go.
This video is 6 tips for better sleep, Sleeping with Science, a TED series. And I guess this is one of the TED Talk channels here. For some reason, it's only got 25K views. Or no, that's thumbs up. It has 707,000K. Okay. So, like he said before, in the Joe Rogan one, number 1 was regularity. And he talks about what time you go to sleep and what time you get up needs to be the same. And putting an alarm for time to go to bed and time to get up. The way that I figured it was I worked backwards. It's like, okay, I want to get up at 6. So what's 8 hours prior? That's 10 o'clock. Actually, I guess I need to change that because I have it for 10:30. And so if I go from 10:30 to 6, that's 7.5 hours. It's still within that acceptable range, but I don't want to push it. So I guess I'm going to have to change one of the two. I don't know which. I like staying up late, though. It's cool. It's calmer. It's just relaxing. I like it. But life is not about getting what you want.
Go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. Regularity is king, and it will actually anchor your sleep and improve both.
Yeah. So I'm already sold on it, so I don't want to hear too much about the reasoning behind it.
It's a 24-hour clock. It works petrol, many, but very something.
Okay.
The next tip is temperature. Keep it cool. It turns out that your brain and your body need to drop their core temperature by about
Your brain and your body.
1 degree Celsius, or
Your brain has to drop by 1 degree Celsius. Your body. So not the room, your brain. And in order to do that, it
around 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit in order to initiate sleep and then to stay asleep. And this is the reason that you will always find it easier to fall asleep in a room that's too cold than too hot. So the current recommendation is to aim for a bedroom temperature of around about 65 degrees Fahrenheit.
65?
Or a little over 18 degrees Celsius. It
Or
sounds
18
cold,
Celsius.
but cold it must be.
Yeah, because you have to drop your body temperature by 1 to 2 degrees. And that's hard. It takes a lot. Just wanted to be clear with that.
Next tip is darkness. We are a dark-deprived society.
This means flashes from your cell phone. This means cars going outside, street lights outside.
And in fact, we need darkness specifically in the evening to trigger the release of a hormone called melatonin.
And he talked about that melatonin. And that about 30 minutes to an hour before you go to bed, turn off at least half your lights. I already knew about this. I've done this. I do this. I turn off everything besides my hall light, and everything else is off. I have not bought blackout curtains though.
And melatonin helps regulate of our sleep. Away from all of those, dim down half of the lights in your house. You'd actually be quite surprised. If you'd like, you can wear an eye mask, or you can have blackout shades.
So I would never buy a mask because I just move around too much, and I'd just probably get annoyed with the thing being on, and I would just rip it off myself. That just seems like it would be so uncomfortable. But blackout shades or curtains, it's like, yeah, one time buy, fairly cheap, all kinds of designs, and I have something kind of like that with my living room, and they're thick enough that they're really thermal curtains, and that's to help with the heating and cooling. So during the summer, whenever it's hot, it helps keep the cool air inside, and vice versa in the winter, that it whenever it's cold outside, it helps keep the heat in, and it absolutely works. I like it a lot, so it helps with my heating and cooling bill just a little bit. And so I need to go ahead and buy it for my bedroom. I've got 3 windows back there, and there's some lights that come on in, and they do bother me. It is a pain. And so after this, I'm going to find some. I'm going to go and measure the window. There's really one measurement that you need, and that is how long it is, because usually they're all the same length. So if you are looking for them, don't be surprised if you have a small window. Don't be surprised. You probably won't find a small curtain. What you'll find is you'll find a curtain that's, yep, it'll be like 2 feet wide or however wide it is. But chances are it's going to drop all the way down to the floor. And what you do is you're going to have to find somebody to cut it for you and resew it, or you just let it hang down to the floor. You're not going to find a little piece of fabric for your little piece of window. It's going to be your window and a long piece of fabric. So if you do that, just, yeah.
And that will help best regulate that critical sleep hormone of melatonin. The next tip is walk it out.
And I'm going to sum up the rest of these. Again, you can watch the video in the links below if you want to watch them to their completion. But I'm just going to speak on these. Number 4 is walk it out. Don't stay in bed for more than 25 minutes. The bed needs to be a trigger for sleep. So if you go to bed and it's been 25 minutes or more, get up. If you wake up in the middle of the night and it's been 25 minutes and you haven't gone back to sleep, get up. I already do this because it's annoying. And he's talking about it, though, as a trigger, that getting into bed should trigger your body into saying that we're going to sleep, we're going to bed, turn off. I get out of bed because, in part, I get annoyed and I also get too hot. So I'll get up and I'll let my body cool and I'll let the bed cool. Or if I'm upset about something, sometimes I'll come and I'll watch something funny on YouTube to help lighten my mood. It just kind of depends on what's going on. And that he says that if you stay in more than 25 minutes, then your bed says, oh, well, this is a place where we're going to watch TV or read a book or whatever it is that we're going to do. It's not time to go to sleep yet, and you're kind of confusing it. It's like, yeah, maybe so. There was this book, Seven Habits by, is it over there? Yes. 7 Habits by Highly Effective People, that all these effective people do, and they talk a whole lot about habits, and that with your short-term memory you can ingrain stuff in even though your long-term memory is gone, and they relate that into habit building. If you want to change your habits, one of the things that you can do is you can go on a cruise for like 30 days and you can change. They talk about it with alcoholics and drug rehab and alcoholic rehab, so that people can go off to rehab and they'll do great, but then they come back and then they get into the old habits, the old friends, the old neighborhoods, and then they're right back in it again. That's why there's like an 80% failure rate whenever people first go and do this. It takes them several times, and it finally starts to sink in that they've got to disassociate themselves with these places, with these people. Number 5 is monitoring your alcohol and caffeine. And I don't want to dive in that too much because just your body is just so complicated. Your digestive system with your, what do they call that, gut biome, you're just going to have to figure that out for yourself because we all have different unique bodies. But for the most part, in general, a good place to start might be adjusting what you're doing with your caffeine and your alcohol. You might want to try push it further and further away from your bedtime. And number 6 is have a wind down routine. And this goes back to the habits that you need to do the same things every single time because you're trying to let your body know what's going on. And we see this too in reverse on the other side of the coin with getting up in the morning with your morning ritual. It's a lot easier if you just do the same thing all the time, every time, that you don't even recognize that you're doing it. Joe Rogan was talking about on his podcast about his daughter tying her shoe and how hard and how focused it is of a task for her to be able to do that. But whenever he does it, he doesn't even have to look, and he can be engaged in something completely else and he can just do it automatically. And they talk about that, and that's exactly what it is that you want to have happen here. And so from that book, from Power of Habits, they talk about how it's going to take a minimum of 30 days for you to be able to successfully change your habits. And that's also as long as you've got good, strong habits and you're not like messing up, like you're only doing it like one every 4 days or something like that. So it's going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of effort. But of course, you know, the longer you do it, the easier it'll be. And then, because of fake news, I was doing this and I was done with the Joe Rogan portion, and then I got this blast about how I had a community strike for fake information. It's like, okay, because I had this plan too beforehand that I was going to find this too, because this is part of what the website's going to deal with. Is I'm tired of all these little fake infomercials and all of these little yuppies who want to throw in their little 2 cents. It's like, we'll take this herb that they used back with ancient Chinese medicine and it's going to make everything great. It's like, is that true? Or is it a placebo effect and you just want it to be true? Where's your evidence? Because I don't trust this little snot-nosed kid for a damn thing. It's like, you can't even wash yourself. You're just living on the road like beast, man. It's like, get out of here. Man, you just make things worse. So let's listen here to whoever the hell this guy is.
Night, you are at risk for developing certain chronic diseases and conditions, including type 2 diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and depression.
Well, you know what? Matthew Walker didn't talk about some of those things, so we got some fake news going on with one of you.
Sleep is crucial to
Or misinformation is how they categorized it.
your overall health and well-being. Here are 6 tips you can incorporate into your daily and nightly routine to help ensure you awake feeling rested and energized.
Is that a guarantee? Because that's misinformation too, because he didn't make that acclamation at all with any of that stuff. He just said it would help.
Tip number 1, reduce blue light exposure.
Oh, you know what? He didn't talk about blue light. He said lights in general, so one of you's got some misinformation going on.
Put down the phone and stop watching TV at least 1 hour before you head to bed. Blue light has been shown to affect our circadian rhythm.
Now, he did talk about circadian rhythms a few times, and it's something that all animals have, and that we've really kind of blown that out of the water. I'm going to have a video where we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth.
Tricking our brain into thinking it's still daytime. If you need to use your phone, install a mobile app or wear glasses that can block blue light. Tip number 2, don't eat or drink before bedtime. Avoid eating.
That's extremely vague. What do you mean? Are you talking about 1 second before you go to bed? 1 minute? 1 hour? 24 hours. 1 day. 1 day before you go to bed.
Large meals, drinking caffeine or alcohol at least 2 hours before going to bed. If you are sensitive to caffeine or have trouble sleeping, it's best not to consume any caffeine after 3 p.m. Tip number
After 3, now he talked about noon on his video, or maybe it wasn't. I saw several videos, but there was one of them said nothing before noon. So somebody's got some misinformation going on.
3, keep your bedroom cool, dark, and quiet. Cooler temperatures.
Quiet? Now, I don't think he said anything about quiet. Misinformation again. And how cool?
Around 70 degrees.
70 degrees? Nope, he said 65. Misinformation.
Best for sleeping. Be sure your bedroom is kept dark and quiet to allow for relaxed.
Anyways, you get the point. Now, what does this mean? Why are we doing this? I don't like people's opinions. I want evidence. And so he was saying that there's all this information out there. And by going through Joe Rogan, he had to have some credentials. I can't get on Joe Rogan because I don't have any credentials worthy enough to get me on his show. And that's the way that it should be. Because he was writing this book, and he's been doing this for 20 years, that got him on. And his book was getting noticed. So it's kind of the same thing with me about saying that, yeah, this guy may not be the world's best, but it's good enough. You should know some things. I'm going to go get a drink. And this is about building up trust with yourself. Something that I've done that I've learned. Have I had this stupid thing this big the whole time? I'm not redoing this video again. Oh my goodness. If I've had this thing this large and you couldn't see what was going on behind, I'm sorry. This has just been one of these days, unfortunately. Everything that I said you can watch on the video with the link in the description below, and I'll get this fixed up. Oh, great. Just great. Why? What's going on with OBS? Anyways. You're not an expert with this. I'm not an expert with this. This guy is. And so until I hear from another expert to contradict all this stuff, this is what I'm going with. This is to start up by building a foundation, in this case with sleep, dealing with my body. I want to create the Noble House Jones. So what this means is that I have a folder called Coat of Arms. Inside of the Coat of Arms, I have other folders. So the design of what it is that I want it to look like, the values that I want my family to have, and then I have keys, and I have them listed. And these are the 6 keys to a good life, and they are body, faith, finances, knowing yourself, knowledge, and personal relationships. And so this one goes under the first one, which is body. And with that, I have diet, exercise, mental health, and physical health. And so this one can be mental or physical because it affects both. And so in there, you click on it, and then here we have sleep. At the bottom, I have what you see before you right now, that it's this sheet, this word pad of the timestamps, Joe Rogan, Matthew Walker, and this is going to be kind of like a summed up textbook, but I'm going to separate this where I'm going to go ahead and accept him at his word that he is an expert, he knows what he's talking about. I've listened to what he said, and now I'm going to put all that aside. I'm not going to try to remember all this. What I'm going to remember is that at this moment right now, I trust myself. I've made the decision that I'm going to believe this guy. And because of it, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to get a schedule where I'm going to go to bed at I guess it's going to be 10 o'clock now. I'm going to get some blackout curtains. I'm going to turn off my lights, and I'm going to make sure that there's no sounds going on, and I'm going to do those things. I'm not going to remember why. I'm going to remember that I did look into it, and I trust me. I made the decision to do this. I'm still going to have it for reference, and at the top, I'm going to have those things. I'm going to have, is that it? Because I've had it, oh, I hope I haven't had that thing blown up the whole time, going all the way across the screen. But at the top, I'm going to have the things listed that I need to do, because that's the only thing that I'm ever going to really look at. And if I need to go over this again because I've heard something that's contradicting this stuff, then I'll have it for reference later. And that's the way that I'm going to do all of this stuff. And that's what I want for the website. I want to be able to click on sleep and see that all this information has been verified. And these are the things that you need to do, because this is what the entire community has said. And not just the community, but here's the experts. And they're the experts because, oh, well, they have their PhD, they've been doing it for decades, they've got a lab and all this research and whatever. And so they're up there, and they're up there because of that, not because they have a blue check mark. Screw that. You can still, be a kid in the parents' basement, but your weight in the matter isn't going to be very high. Whatever it is that you are proficient at, it's like, okay, yeah. So, yeah, this website's going to be freaking fantastic. So the only real people who are going to be able to comment on sleep, for example, are only the people who are actually trained people who have experience with sleep. And it's going to be based off of research and evidence. It's like, oh, well, this is the way that sleep is. It's like, okay, well, where's your evidence? Oh, well, I have my evidence. Here's the research and studies. Okay, has it been peer reviewed, though? Because that's part of the problem, is that people make these accusations, and then whenever it does go under peer review, they're like, what did you do? I can't get these results at all. And it's like, well, that's fine. You shouldn't have published it, though. You should work out the kinks in it if it can, and then you do it. Anyways, what you can do is, do you understand what's being said? Do you trust this guy? Is this something that you're interested in? Then open up a WordPad and be like, okay, well, I'm going to do my part with my body, myself, and sleep, and I'm going to get some blackout curtains. I'm going to have a schedule. I'm going to go to sleep at this time. You think of it like school. You have to go and you have to review for a test. You don't just remember stuff. So write this stuff down somewhere. Write it on a piece of paper. And then have it for reference. So if you've understood this and you agree with the video and you're tired of the lies and you like just really informational videos for a better life, give this video a like, give it a thumbs up. I've got Patreon and Subscribestar. The sooner I can get those things going, the sooner I can start building the website. It's going to be great. If YouTube has their way, they're going to call everything I say misinformation. It's like, well, yeah, I know I'm impressive, but I'm not God. I don't know everything. You know, what a ridiculous standard to have. So we'll see you again later. Bye.